Drake detonated his last working weapon in front of a live camera, and the room that used to tremble at that exact sentence, it laughed. 4 words: the pen isn't dry. That's the whole warning. No name, no target, no timestamp. Just a flex wrapped in expensive silence, delivered from a betting stream between jewelry close-ups. And I'm not letting this slide, because the fury here isn't about the man, it's about the math. A king who used to whisper and watch the culture recalibrate is now announcing his own sharpness out loud, while the only rapper actually swinging at him keeps circling without a word. The throne didn't crack under outside fire. The blast came from inside the building. Before we get into it, like, subscribe, don't miss it. Nah, trust me, this one gets ugly. It went down on Kick, with the steak ecosystem glowing in the corner. The other night, somewhere between the poker chips and the bottle service, Drake turned to the lens and addressed the entire rap ecosystem, a warning dipped in gratitude, aimed at nobody by name. Same week, the Joe Budden podcast dropped an episode that met that warning with 2 words and a verdict that moved more air than anything on that stream. 2 events, 1 week. One names no one, the other names the problem. And I know half of y'all already wrote your caption in the comments before I got here. Good, bring it. That's the setup. Time for the proof. Every warning has a filing cabinet behind it, and Drake's cabinet is heavier than the narrative admits. Rewind to the last war, the last time the planet watched him pull the pen in an actual battle. It ended with 2 decisive losses, Pusha T first, then Kendrick Lamar, in the loudest, most cultural defeat this genre has ever manufactured. And here's the detail the highlight reels skip. The last thing the culture sat down and read from Drake wasn't a verse, it was a court filing. In printed language, the argument that the label was artificially juicing the very record that beat him, and that a rap record posed a physical threat to Drake's own body. Lyrics handed to a judge like a danger report. Nobody said that out loud when it landed. That's about to matter. Now wind the clock forward to the fight happening right now. The active war opened with shots angled at A$AP Rocky on a record called Iceman, aimed at one chest. Rocky answered the way Rocky answers, on his own album run, dropping the now famous trade about borrowed flows and borrowed girlfriends, plus weeks of bar-for-bar ping-pong over where she at and which girl wasn't supposed to be single. Then it left the music. Rocky sat across from Jason Lee and spoke on Drake with his full chest open. Then Rihanna out in public with Rocky, tossing grenades of her own about the old flame lurking around the studio. That's not a cold front, that's an active weather system with lightning in both directions, and it's been building for months. Before the comment section sprints to the Jay-Z lane, sit that theory down. Nobody is warning Hav, nobody is cautioning a legend about sharpening his tongue. That idea dies on contact with the evidence. Run the roll call instead. Big Sean, silent. Real standing, overlapping lane, overlapping style, careers in wildly different tax brackets. Tyler, not playing. Baby Keem, not playing. Wale, not playing. The complete list of rappers in active friction with Drake this year starts and stops with one name, A$AP Rocky. One opponent, one active war. Everything else is noise. Now drop the needle on the night itself, because the timing is doing quiet damage. The warning landed at the closing edge of one of the strongest quarters Drake has posted since the last war. 3 projects moving units, the charts flexing, the redemption arc humming again. That's precisely the window where a warning had to happen.
You don't warn from the valley. It carries no leverage down there. You warn from the summit, while the streams surge and the wind sits behind your back. But here's the tell inside that timing. If the ground were really steady, the warning wouldn't need to exist. A secure king doesn't broadcast the sharpness of his blade. Secure kings just wear it. And what Drake wore that night was a jewelry highlight reel. Bracelet reveals, double chrome, Cartier, price tags he never even voiced, unrolling behind him while he talked about the pen. The costume showed up before the warning, and then the words. He opened the camera time by thanking the love, the last stretch of months, unbelievable in his words. Then came the line that should be studied. I dropped 3 on their heads. These other guys drop albums and it's a wave and a fade out. Read that twice. Still didn't help. Look at what he actually punched with. 3 units, volume, count. A boast built on quantity. And one breath later, he switched weapons entirely. Be careful with that reply, because the pen isn't dry. That's the entire shot Drake fired this week, and the timeline turned the clip into a code-breaking competition over who it was aimed at. So run the ladder with me. Why a betting stream? Why in the middle of a jewelry montage? Why that reply and not every reply? Why warn a room he can't name? And why does the only man he's actually swinging at never flinch? Run those in order, and the sentence starts undressing itself. Stop scrolling for one breath. Exhale. Because the next node in this timeline is where the story flips from warning to verdict. A fresh episode of the Joe Budden podcast dropped, and Budden himself, on his own microphone, in his own room, walked directly in front of Drake's warning and loaded exactly 2 words: stop it. Now, I know my history with that podcast. I've dragged it across this channel for years, challenged the takes and the loops and the whole operation. So understand the weight of this. It might be the first time in a very long calendar that I'm fully aligned with a Budden read. And the read is surgical. The rappers who actually rap, the real MCs holding this game down, are not afraid of Drake. Nobody is home wondering whether the pen is wet, dry, soggy, or gilded. And what gives it extra weight is the source, the same voice that propped Drake up through the darkest quarters of the last 2-year block. When the man who carried your water starts reading you out loud in front of millions, that's not a crack in the wall. That's the house barring its own door from the inside. Budden didn't just reject the warning, he rebuilt the power grid underneath it. There was a season, years back, when a Drake warning in this tone moved real fear. Rollouts got recalibrated. Rappers adjusted their calendars around him. That era existed. That's historical record. Budden's argument was never that Drake was never dangerous. It's that the season is closed, and the reason is evidentiary, not sentimental. 2 public defeats, 1 legal document, 0 examples successfully made. Fear in this game doesn't work like a framed certificate. It works like a payment that has to clear, over and over. And the account has been overdrawn for a minute. Somebody stopped paying, and the culture noticed before the king did. Here's the part that stings most. Budden delivered all of it while openly handing Drake the talent credit, gave him the pen, and stripped the fear in the same exhalation. That's the most airtight version in circulation, because it can't be dismissed as slander. Not a hater's argument, a fan's diagnosis. Then came the most exposing beat of the episode.
One of the voices who spent years positioning Drake as his mans, years of campaigning for the music, the movement, the whole cinematic universe, rotated on camera in real time. That's not my mans. I don't want to know him. Why would I want to meet another man? Funny side first, this voice sits in a room full of men twice a week for a living. Absurd on his face, but the retreat is the point, not the deflection. When the people who stake their whole public credibility on standing shoulder to shoulder with you start backpedaling the second your tough talk wobbles, you just learned how your warning registered with the people supposed to amplify it. Check the order of operations, because the sequence does surgical damage. Drake spent years as the most fortified name in podcasting. He took the loudest loss in the genre's history, and the defenses kept flowing anyway. Through the loss, through the memes, through the wave of jokes that buried his credibility for a whole season. That same room kept vouching for the brand, kept the bridge up. Do you know what finally opened the first genuine scene? Not the loss, not the lawsuit. A bracelet close-up and a jewelry montage on a gambling stream. The final straw wasn't a rap infraction at all. It was a vibe collapse, and it raises the question nobody at that table wanted to touch. If the exact same warning had rolled off the 2018 model of Drake, would a single person in that room have laughed? Zero chance. The laughter was never at the sentence, it was at the balance sheet. Now carry the case file into the room, because this piece welds itself to everything Drake says from here on out. The last battle Drake lost didn't end in the booth, it ended in a courtroom. The final thing Drake wrote that the culture actually read was not a verse. It was a filing that characterized another artist's lyrics as a solicitation for vigilante action, a diss track reframed as a physical danger, submitted to a judge. Do you grasp what that does to a warning like, "Be careful how you reply"? It empties the thing completely. You cannot menace the booth after you subpoenaed the booth. You cannot instruct MCs to guard their tongues inside a genre where your last move was sliding another man's bars in front of attorneys. That context is welded to the record permanently. Any honest read of Drake's pen that skips the case file isn't analysis, it's fan fiction. And it's why the smartest takes land in the same place from different runways. Drake is no longer feared as a competitor. He's managed with legal caution as a litigant. Two completely different reputations to bring into a rap conflict. One makes rappers sharpen their tips, the other makes them shrug and return to their studio calendars. Now zoom in, because this is where the channel separates from the news ticker. Isolate one word from the warning, just one. Be careful with that reply. Not any reply, that reply. The definite article doing heavy lifting, as if a specific response is already sitting out there waiting, and Drake already knows what it says. That singular word quietly admits the whole game. He's not threatening the field, he's bracing for one chest. Now the second word that matters, the pen isn't dry. He didn't say the run is unmatched. He didn't say the albums are untouchable. He said the pen, the exact instrument that lost the last two wars, is still wet. A man who just flexed 3 on their heads, units and volume and count, reached for the one thing that didn't move any of them, a quotable bar. The same panel flagged it in real time. 3 projects launched with barely a single quotable bar between the entire run, and the first flex the culture was asked to catch was the pen. That is a man grabbing the weapon that misfired in front of millions and shaking it at the sky. Pause this part, park it, because the behavioral evidence lands harder. Budden's entire counter was 2 words, 2. Against a paragraph of jewelry-backed menace, the heaviest thing said all week was shorter than a cough. And watch what never happened. Nobody panicked, nobody went quiet. The room split on whether Drake can still threaten anyone, and the split itself is the story. One side said the pen can range against a broad field. The other answered with the only question that matters: does anybody's behavior shift? A threat and fear are not the same currency. Anybody can issue a threat. A middle schooler can issue a threat. Value is measured entirely by whether the recipient moves a single millimeter. And right now, the field isn't moving. The court of public opinion reached its verdict before this video loaded. Roll the roster one more time and watch the reach collapse. Gunna, Young Thug, Lil Yachty, Don Toliver. In the loosest reading, a warning can technically fit anyone. But none of those artists move in the traditional bar-to-bar come see about me classification, and cautioning them costs Drake nothing. The entire value of a warning lives in the fear it generates inside people who could actually clap back, and there it dies on arrival. The names capable of answering Drake are exactly the names carrying zero fear. Kendrick? That chapter closed in front of the whole planet, and closed chapters don't reopen. Cole stepped out of the arena voluntarily, still standing. Rocky, already mid-swing and already landing. So Drake is issuing a warning into a room where every occupant has either beaten him, exited the arena, or is actively connecting on him. Real talk, heads in my inbox have been telling me this since the paperwork dropped. The fight stopped being about who can rap the day the lyrics got filed as evidence. Nobody puts that on camera, they just whisper it. And here's the detail almost nobody flagged. In that entire podcast debate about who Drake might be aiming at, A$AP Rocky's name barely surfaced. The one man actually trading punches with him didn't even make the fear conversation. That should tell you everything about how much fear the warning is generating. A threat that can't even name the only person it could hurt isn't a threat. It's an alert that vibrates silently in nobody's pocket. Now let me tell you what nobody in the industry will put on a company timeline. Everybody's reading this week is rap beef. Who's afraid of the pen? Who should reply? Who's the mystery target? That's the surface layer of a much bigger ledger. Forget the drama for a second. Follow the money, follow the timing, follow the beneficiaries. Because here's the read I think nobody in the building wants printed. Drake's real opponent was never Rocky. It's the machine he's standing inside. Yeah, I said it. And I'm not backing off. Here's why. I didn't soften it. The last time Drake needed leverage in this genre, he didn't reach for a verse, he reached for a filing. The label juicing argument, the diss track reframed as a physical danger. That's not a rapper operating, that's an asset deploying its corporate armor.
You cannot menace the booth after you subpoenaed the booth, and the entire industry got that memo the day the paperwork hit. The distance between being feared as a competitor and managed with legal caution as a litigant is the distance between a rival and a liability. One sharpens the culture's pens, the other files it away. Now look at the stage he chose for the warning. Not a cipher, not a freestyle, not even his own platform. A betting stream wrapped in the stake ecosystem, surrounded by chips and jewelry close-ups. The summit he's warning from isn't the Culture Summit anymore, it's the Commerce Summit. The three on their heads are units. The comeback narrative is a quarterly report.
This is what industry gatekeeping looks like in the streaming era. The house protects the crown, because the crown feeds the house. The label structure, the platform deals, the gambling partnerships, the algorithm. Every pillar of the machine profits from keeping the biggest asset looking unbeatable. So nobody inside the building will ever tell Drake the truth, because the truth is bad for the assets. Look at who broke ranks this week. An outsider on a platform the machine doesn't control. A podcaster with zero obligations to the empire. And even he handed the pen its flowers before he took the fear away, because that's how you make a read bulletproof. The machine gave Drake the title Best of Everything, and somewhere along the way, the title became the job. That's the part that should enrage the fans. The industry isn't protecting a rapper, it's protecting inventory. And here's the uncomfortable mirror. Because the culture loves handing out grace and second chances, let's run the exact same standard across every table. J. Cole walked into a battle, gauged the temperature, apologized on a record, and stepped off the field. For that, wide sections of the internet permanently revoked his competitive credentials. Every time Cole says anything remotely spicy now, a whole demographic plugs its ears. But Cole apologized for a verse. He didn't file suit over one. He didn't slide another man's bars into a legal exhibit. So if the man holding the docket stub earns an open lane back to being feared, then the man who simply said "my bad" on wax and walked deserves that same lane at bare minimum. I'm not campaigning for Cole to battle again. That's his call. But either the standards are universal, or we admit out loud that they were never about rap in the first place. The double standard doesn't smell, it reeks. So here's the line I want you to screenshot tonight. This isn't a story about a dry pen. It's about a throne now owned by the building, and buildings don't bleed. The machine will keep polishing the crown as long as the crown pays the machine. What it stopped doing this week, what it can never do again, is shake the room. A warning without fear underneath is just content, and the house knows it. The question is whether the next verse will ever arrive. And if this were a courtroom, the verdict wrote itself before the defendant finished speaking. Exhibit A, the file that turned a diss track into a danger report. Exhibit B, the two-word rebuttal that emptied the courtroom. The jury clocked out hours ago. The receipts don't lie. The narrative does. So where does the board stand? 3 moves left, and here's why all 3 fail, plus the one move that would change everything, and why he won't take it. Move 1. He names the target and answers on wax. Direct, fast, no filters, no attorneys. This is the only move with restoration power, and it still fails for a structural reason. The culture's recipe demands 3 ingredients. You get tested by name, you respond while the iron is hot, and the response has to be so decisive it terminates the conversation. Drake's last 2 outings against that recipe ended with the planet watching him walk out bruised, so the first example he makes has to be airtight, and the only opponent on the roster is A$AP Rocky, the one man who has proven he doesn't flinch. Rocky answered Iceman with his own album run. He sat across from Jason Lee with his chest open. He's got Rihanna tossing grenades in his corner. If Drake takes this swing and it doesn't end the conversation, he's confirming the verdict the podcast just read out. Watch for this. If a named, unfiltered response drops inside the next 30 days with no lawyer smell on it, the game flips. Bet on this. It won't.
Move 2, he doubles down on the legal lane. More filings, more machine leverage, keeping the field reminded the pen ships with the paper trail. This fails for a currency reason. You cannot collect fear with a subpoena. Every document he files cements the litigant reputation, and a litigant doesn't make rappers sharpen their tips, it makes them shrug and return to their studio calendars. The field isn't scared of the paperwork, it's just annoyed by it. And the fans he's performing for can't screenshot a docket as triumph the way they can a bar.
The machine might love this move because it's the safest for the assets, but it's the exact move that makes the coach's eyes glaze over. Watch for this. If label-adjacent voices start floating legal angles in interviews, the campaign is running through the building, not the booth. Move 3, he retreats into the cycle. More streams, more flex content, more vague warnings aimed at nobody, more jewelry close-ups, feeding the ticket holders the highlight reel while the room outside the tent watches without moving. This fails quietly, and that's the most dangerous failure of all, because it's invisible in the moment. The home crowd keeps cheering, the numbers hold, the narrative engine hums, and the fear market stays closed with no press release. But a threat that exists only for the people who already believe is a candle burning in a locked room. The podcast circuit will fact-check every cycle, and here's the cold reality. Drake used to be content that rappers were afraid of him. Now he's content that podcasters audit him in real time. That's the trade he'd be signing without noticing. Watch for this. If the next 90 days produce another nameless warning and no response dropped, the first 2 moves are off the table, and this is the path he's on. Now the credibility round, because I'm not a one-sided horn section. There is a winning move, and it's the one he won't take because it costs him everything he's currently getting away with. Name the opponent, write the answer, make an example. That's the entire cookbook, and every ingredient of recent conduct runs opposite to it. Slow, indirect, lawyered, aimed at the audience instead of the opposition. So the real chess on this board is inside Drake's own camp, whether the machine lets the asset risk its balance sheet for the one flex that would actually work. Mark my words, if Rocky keeps moving without a syllable through the next album cycle, the fear market stays closed until further notice. Whichever way this breaks, Drake is walking out with the bruises. The scoreboard's already written, he just hasn't read it yet. And if the wild card timeline hits and he actually takes move 1, we're doing a part 2. Subscribe so you don't miss that one. Thanks for watching Celebsphere. If you enjoyed uncovering the real story, smash that like button and hit subscribe so you never miss when we expose what everyone else is too scared to say. Ring that bell for notifications, and if you want more truth bombs like this, click on one of these videos next. Trust me, you'll want to see what we found.